Full story. Marry me today, she told a broke stranger, not knowing he was the Alpha King in disguise. Marry me today, she told a broke stranger, not knowing he was the Alpha King in disguise. True real-life story. Third person, single part, 9,000 words. The letter was not long. That was the cruelest part. Everything Nadia Osei had left in this world. The house, the garden her mother had grown tomatoes in, the cracked kitchen tiles her mother had always meant to replace, the smell of the hallway, all of it was being taken in 4 short paragraphs. 48 hours, stamped in red at the top like it was just another piece of admin. She read it 3 times at the kitchen table, then she folded it and put it in her coat pocket and sat there a little longer. The kettle was on. The kettle clicked off. She did not make tea. Nadia was 28 years old, and she had not cried in front of anyone in 4 years. She was not about to start now, alone in the kitchen of a house that was about to stop being hers. The debt was her father's. He had signed her name onto a loan when she was 19 and studying nursing at a college 2 cities away. She had not known about it until she was 23, when the first letter arrived. She had spent the next 5 years negotiating, arguing, and paying back whatever she could scrape together from 2 jobs and a pair of shoes that had been resold twice. She had kept the wolves at the door long enough. Now the door was the problem. They wanted the door. Her mother had died in this house 14 months ago. It was the only thing left. Nadia pulled on her coat, took the letter out of her pocket, read it one more time, and went to the courthouse. The courthouse on Milrose Street was the kind of building that had been designed to make you feel small before you even got inside. Big stone steps, doors that were too heavy, a lobby that echoed everything, including the sound of you figuring out you were in the wrong queue. Nadia was a woman who had spent years doing things without help. She had watched her mother navigate the same world. No husband, no backup plan, just 2 hands and a schedule she kept on a paper notebook. Nadia had inherited the same stubbornness. She walked in, found the right counter, and asked for a clerk. The clerk who came to help her was named Dennis. Dennis looked like a man who had been mildly disappointed by something for his entire adult life. He read the letter, he typed something, he read it again. "This is the enforcement order," he said, like she didn't know that. "I know, I want to contest it. On what grounds?" That was the question. Nadia had done her research. She had spent 2 nights on legal websites, reading statutes she barely understood, looking for anything, any thread. She had found one. A small one, a strange one. "There's a co-ownership clause," she said. "If the property has a married co-owner, enforcement can be frozen for up to 90 days to allow a legal challenge." Dennis looked at her over his glasses. "Are you married?" "Not yet," she said. Dennis blinked. He typed something. He looked back at his screen. He was the kind of man who needed the conversation to go in a straight line, and Nadia had just bent it sideways. "The window for filing the freeze," she said. "When does it close?" "End of business today," he said. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:43 in the morning. She picked up the letter, said thank you to Dennis in the voice she used when she meant it without making it soft, and walked out into the gray morning air. She sat down on the courthouse steps. She needed a husband. She needed one by 5 o'clock. She had never been more aware of not having one. There was a man sitting at the other end of the bench eating a vending machine sandwich like it was a perfectly acceptable lunch. He was not what you would call remarkable at first glance. Jeans that fit, a plain jacket, the kind of trainers people wear when they are not trying to be noticed. He was sitting with his elbows on his knees, looking at the middle distance, eating slowly. He had the posture of someone with no particular appointment and no particular worry about it. Nadia sat down 3 feet away from him and stared at the street. She was not the kind of person who did impulsive things. Everything she had ever done, she had thought through twice. The nursing job, the tutoring shifts, the 5 years of debt negotiation. Every step had been deliberate, sensible, done with both feet on the ground. She looked at the man. He was eating his sandwich. She looked at the street again. She thought, this is a terrible idea. She thought, I cannot think of a single other idea. She thought, he looks like the sort of person who does not have an appointment today. She turned to him. I have an unusual question, she said. He stopped chewing. He looked at her. His eyes were dark and very steady, the kind that do not give you much to read. Go ahead, he said. She did not lead up to it. There was no time to lead up to it. And besides, she had spent enough of her life saying hard things to people who did not want to hear them. I need to get married today, she said. It needs to be a legal marriage, but it would be a temporary arrangement. 90 days. I need to freeze an asset seizure on my home while I build a legal challenge. Once the challenge is done, we get it annulled. You would need to sign some paperwork and list the property as co-owned. You wouldn't have to do anything else. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I have £500, that's everything in my account right now, and this. She put a watch on the bench between them. Gold face, worn strap, old. It was my mother's. It's worth more than 500. You can hold it as collateral. When this is done, I get it back. The man looked at the watch. Then he looked at her. He did not look alarmed. He did not look like he was about to laugh. He looked like a man reading a document very carefully before he decided what he thought of it. What if your legal challenge fails? He said. Then I lose the house anyway and you keep the watch. And you'd want this done today. Before 5. The window closes. He was quiet. Not the quiet of someone who was uncomfortable. The quiet of someone who was actually thinking. Nadia waited. She was good at waiting. She had spent years waiting on things that might not come through. All right, he said. She looked at him. All right, yes? Or all right, you need a minute. All right, yes. She looked at him for another second. He picked up his sandwich and took another bite, very calmly, like the conversation had been about bus times. My name is Nadia, she said. Callum, he said. She nodded. She stood up. The office that does the paperwork is on the 3rd floor. We have time if we go now. Let me finish my sandwich, he said. She sat back down. They were married by 11:15. The clerk was a woman called Vera, who had been doing this for 20 years and had perfected the art of showing no reaction to anything. The witnesses were a retired postal worker named Bernard, who was waiting on the 4th floor for something unrelated and was delighted to help, and a young woman named Precious, who had come in for a parking appeal and agreed when Nadia asked her in the corridor. The room was small, white walls, a desk, a laminated sign about fees. Vera read the words in the specific flat tone of someone who has read them several thousand times. Callum signed where he was told. Nadia signed where she was told. Bernard and Precious signed. Vera stamped something. That was that. Outside the building, Nadia shook Callum's hand. It felt strange to shake the hand of the person she had just married, but she had started this on formal terms, and it seemed right to keep it there. I'll be in touch about the legal process, she said. There might be some documents you need to sign. I'll give you as much notice as I can. Okay, he said. Thank you. I mean that. I know, he said, not in a way that was unkind. She turned and walked down the steps. She had a meeting with a housing solicitor at 2. She had the wedding certificate in her bag and a plan, or at least the beginning of one, and she had not cried once. She did not look back. Behind her, Callum stood on the steps for a moment. Then he went back inside to finish what he had come to do. What Nadia did not know, standing at that bus stop, holding her bag against her chest with the wedding certificate tucked inside it, was this. Callum Rea was not a man who had nowhere to be. He was, in fact, the person that a very large number of people very badly needed to be in very specific places. He was the majority owner of the Rea Group, a private investment firm that had grown in the last decade into something that made financial journalists use words like quietly dominant and deliberately opaque. He sat on 4 boards. He had a building in the city with his surname on it, though the sign was small and the font was plain, which was very much on purpose. He had been in the area for 8 days. He was there because one of his companies had become entangled in a property dispute that was working its way through the courts, and he had decided, in the way that he occasionally decided things that made his assistant Theo want to take a long walk into the sea, to observe the proceedings himself, under a different name, staying at a bed and breakfast on Kennet Road that charged £40 a night and had a shared bathroom. Nobody had recognized him. That was the point. He had done this kind of thing before, gone somewhere ordinary, lived like someone ordinary, reminded himself what ordinary felt like. He did not do it because he was eccentric. He did it because the alternative was a life conducted entirely at a distance from anything real, and he had watched that happen to people, and he had decided it would not happen to him. He had been sitting on those courthouse steps because he had finished in court for the morning, and the next session was at 2, and his sandwich had been eaten in parks, and on steps, and in cars, for so many years that it was simply what he did. He had said yes to Nadia, because she had asked him like someone who expected to be told no, and had decided to ask anyway, because she had put a dead woman's watch on a bench between them as collateral without a trace of self-pity, because she had told him the exact terms of the arrangement with the precision of someone who had thought it through and was not asking for anything beyond what she had stated. In Callum's life, that was rare enough to be remarkable. He had said yes. Then he had gone back inside, phoned Theo, told him there had been a development, and listened to the 7-second silence on the other end of the line that meant Theo was deciding how to respond to something he did not entirely understand. "You're married," Theo said, eventually, "for 90 days. "Right," said Theo. Another silence. "Should I?" "No," said Callum. "Not yet. I'll call you when I need something." He hung up. He went back to the bed and breakfast on Kennet Road. He sat on the narrow bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about a woman who had offered him a watch that cost more than she said because she was too proud to offer more than the terms required. The cohabitation requirement arrived the next day. Nadia's solicitor, a small, precise woman named Adaeze, who wore reading glasses on a chain and did not waste words, explained it over the phone while Nadia was on her lunch break from the clinic. "The freeze holds," Adaeze said, "but they're going to want proof of cohabitation, shared address, evidence the marriage is genuine, bills, letters, ideally some history of you living together at the property." Nadia stared at the wall of the break room. How long before they ask for it? They may not. But if they push back on the challenge, they will, and given who holds the debt, they will push back. Nadia hung up. She ate half her sandwich. She thought about this for the rest of her shift, which made her slightly slower at paperwork, but not slow enough for anyone to notice. That evening she called Callum. He answered on the second ring, which surprised her. "There's been a development," she said. She told him about the cohabitation requirement. She told him she understood if this changed things. She told him she could try to sort something else. He listened without interrupting. "I'll move in tomorrow," he said. "You don't have to. I know. I'll bring my things tomorrow evening." She was quiet for a moment. "You're not going to ask any questions about this. What would you like me to ask? Most people would want to know more before they agree. You told me what I needed to know yesterday," he said. "Same terms. I'll see you tomorrow." He hung up. Nadia stood in the kitchen of her mother's house and looked at the spare room where her aunt used to sleep when she visited. There was a single bed and a window that faced the garden, and a bookshelf with her mother's old novels still on it. She went and made the bed properly, with the good linen. He arrived the next evening with one bag, a proper hold-all, not over-full, the kind of bag you pack when you know what you need. He looked at the house the way a quiet person looks at a room they want to understand before they speak about it. He did not say anything complimentary or awkward. He just came in, put the bag down, and asked where the bathroom was. This turned out to be the right thing to do. The first few days were careful and slightly formal, the way things are when two strangers are managing the administration of being around each other. They worked out the kitchen without having a conversation about the kitchen. He made coffee in the morning, and there was always enough for two. She did the shopping on Thursdays, and he started contributing without being asked, leaving things on the counter that had run out. They had dinner at the same table most evenings because the kitchen was small, and eating in separate rooms would have required effort neither of them had the energy for after their respective days. He did not tell her what his days involved. She did not ask. They had agreed to keep this transactional, and she respected the terms she herself had set. On the fourth day he fixed the kitchen tap. She had been meaning to call someone about it for 3 weeks, and hadn't because calling someone cost money, and the tap was not quite bad enough to push past everything else on the list. He fixed it on a Sunday morning while she was at work, using tools from a box he had found under the stairs. When she came home, it was done. She noticed it the way you notice something the moment it stops being a problem. She said thank you. He said it was fine. On the 7th day she came home, and the smell of food hit her before she got the key in the door. Something with onions and spice, warm and deliberate. She stood in the hallway for a second, with her coat half off, a little thrown by it, the way good smells in an empty house always carry some grief behind them. He had made rice and a chicken stew from the things that were in the fridge, and there was enough for 2. She ate 2 bowls. She did not tell him it was the best meal she'd had in 4 months, but she thought it. She thanked him for cooking. He said he found it useful. She did not know what that meant exactly, and she did not ask. But she washed up, which she had not been doing when it was only her dishes, and that felt like the right kind of response. By the end of the 2nd week, the formality had softened into something that was still careful, but no longer stiff. They had conversations in the evenings. Not long ones, not deep ones, but real ones, the kind where both people are actually saying what they think instead of saying what seems appropriate. He asked her once about nursing, not in the polite surface way people ask, not, do you enjoy it, or, is it difficult, but specifically about a case she'd mentioned offhand, about a patient who kept refusing to take her medication. She had mentioned it in passing, and he had remembered it 2 days later and circled back. Nobody had ever done that to her before. Just remembered something she said and came back to it. She talked about it. About the frustration of watching someone refuse help they needed. About how you learn, in that job, to find the room between what you want for someone and what they're ready for. About how her mother had been the same way, stubborn to the end about what she would and wouldn't accept from other people. Callum listened. He said, "Did she accept help from you?" "Not much," Nadia said. "I had to be sneaky about it. I'd do things and call it something else." "Like what?" "I'd come round and say I was bored, so could we cook something? And then I'd do most of it." She knew what I was doing. She didn't say anything because she had the same pride about it that I do, and she could recognize it in me, and she found it funny. She had not said that out loud to anyone before. It was one of those memories that lived in a very particular place, behind everything else, too specific and too tender to just hand over to conversation. She had handed it over to conversation. Callum did not say, "That's beautiful," or "She sounds lovely," or any of the other things people say when they want to respond but don't know how. He said, "She sounds like someone who made you work for it." Nadia laughed. A short, real one. "She absolutely did," she said. They drank their tea. Outside, the garden was dark. The power went out on a Tuesday. Something down the street, apparently. The whole row went dark at 8:15. Nadia found the candles. Her mother had always kept a drawer full of them, and lit them and set them on the kitchen table. It was too dark to read. The phones were both low. The world outside was quiet. There was nowhere useful to be. They sat with the candles between them and talked for 2 hours. This was the evening that changed something. Not dramatically, not in a way either of them could have pointed at and named. But something shifted in the way that things shift in small dark rooms when there is nothing to do and nowhere to go, and the ordinary props of an ordinary evening have been removed. She told him about the debt, all of it, the full story, which she had never told anyone in full, not her friends, not her colleagues, not Adai's. She told him about her father's signature, and the letter that arrived when she was 23, and the conversation she'd had with her mother, standing in this kitchen, where her mother had cried for the first time in Nadia's memory, and then dried her eyes and said, "Right, what do we do?" She didn't ask him why, Nadia said. She didn't even call him. She just said, "What do we do?" Because that was how she operated. You don't spend time being angry about the thing you can't change. You deal with what's in front of you. "And you do the same," Callum said. Not a question. "I try," she said. "I'm not as good at it as she was. I have more anger in me." "The anger is useful," he said. "Not always." "No," he said. "But it's honest. People who aren't angry about things that deserve anger are just people who aren't paying attention." Nadia looked at him across the candles. He was looking at the flame, not at her, which made it easier to look at him. He had a way of saying things that sat level, not wise in the performed way, not careful in the guarded way, just level, like he had spent time thinking about things and had arrived at positions he wasn't going to move from without good reason, and he was happy to share them without needing you to agree. She liked it more than she wanted to. "What do you actually do?" she said. "You've never told me." "Finance," he said. "That's not an answer. It's accurate. It's also what people say when they don't want to say." He looked at her then. A pause she could not quite read. "I manage money," he said. "Other people's money, mostly. I'm good at it." "Do you like it?" "I like the problem-solving part," he said. "I'm less interested in the rest." "What's the rest?" "The performing," he said. "The convincing people of things. The room where everyone wants something from you, and the conversation is about that, underneath, no matter what anyone's actually saying." He said it neutrally, without complaint, just a fact about his life. Nadia thought about it. She thought about rooms where people want things from you. She had been in different versions of those rooms her whole life. "That's exhausting," she said. "Yes," he said, simply, like he was glad someone had said it plainly. The lights came back on at 10. They both blinked. The conversation closed the way conversations close when the world interrupts them. They cleared the cups. They said goodnight. She went to her room and lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling, and told herself that nothing had happened, and believed it approximately 50% of the way. Week 4, a Thursday. Nadia came home from the clinic and found Callum in the garden. He was clearing the overgrown patch at the far end where her mother's tomato plants had been, the ones that had gone wild and gone to seed after her mother got too ill to tend them, and that Nadia had not been able to bring herself to clear, because clearing them meant finishing something. She stood at the back door and watched him work for a moment. He had not asked. He was doing it carefully, not roughly, not clearing it out, but sorting through it. The dead canes pulled from the living soil, things that might still grow given room to do it. She did not say stop. She did not say thank you. She went inside and made tea for both of them and brought it out and put his on the wall beside him. He nodded. She sat on the step. She thought, "He is a stranger. He has been here 4 weeks. I do not know why he is being kind, and I do not know how to ask without making it strange, and I am not sure I want the answer to be a simple one." She drank her tea. He worked until it got dark. When he came in, he washed his hands at the kitchen sink, and she handed him the other mug, and they stood in the kitchen not saying very much. And it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that only happens between people who have started to be easy with each other. This was not the deal. The deal had been transactional. Papers, 90 days. A watch as collateral. She drank her tea. On a Friday evening in the 5th week, Nadia was reaching for the jar of cumin on the top shelf, and Callum was at the hob, and she leaned across him without thinking, and her hand was there, and his hand was there in the same small space, and neither of them moved. Half a second, 1 second, 2. The kitchen was warm, the hob was on. Outside the window, the street had gone quiet for the evening. She took the jar. He turned back to the hob. She went back to the counter. Neither of them said a word about it, and neither of them needed to. But the moment had a specific weight to it that lodged somewhere and did not leave. The phone call happened on a Wednesday morning. Nadia was getting her coat when she heard him. He had stepped out of the back door into the garden, which he sometimes did when he got calls. She had assumed, and she was not sure why she had assumed this, except that people make assumptions that fit the story they're already telling, that he stepped outside for privacy and space, the way anyone does when they need to concentrate. She was not trying to listen. She was putting on her coat. His voice reached her through the window. It was different, not louder, not harder, just authoritative in a way that did not match the man who sat at her table and fixed her tap and cleared her mother's garden. The register was lower. The words were different. Board, acquisition, Q4, and then someone on the other end of the line saying, "Yes, sir," in a way that meant it, and then Callum saying, "Hold the announcement until I'm back in the building," and then silence. He came back inside. He saw her. She had not moved. She had her coat half on. She was looking at him. His face did something very small, not a flinch, not guilt, just, A brief rearrangement, the way a person's face moves when they have been seen doing something they did not intend to be seen doing. She looked at him for a moment. "I'm going to be late," she said, and left. She thought about it all day. The word building. The phrase, "until I'm back in the building," said the way you say a place you own. She thought, finance. "I manage money. I'm good at it." She thought, how good? She thought, I don't know anything about this man. I married him on a bench in 40 minutes. She thought, underneath everything, in the place she did not let surface yet, but I know some things. I know how he is. I know how he is when no one is performing anything, and that is more than I know about most people I've been in rooms with for years. She filed those thoughts. She went back to her patients. She went home. Neither of them said anything about the phone call that evening. The story broke on a Saturday morning at 7:42. Nadia was in bed when the notification came through. She almost ignored it. She turned her phone over, saw the preview, turned it back, sat up and read it. There was a photograph. It had been taken from a distance, on the street 2 weeks ago, not far from the house. A journalist, she would find out later it was a freelance one, who had recognized him outside a hardware shop and spent the next 3 days piecing it together, had figured out where he was staying. The headline used the words reclusive and billionaire in the same sentence. The article was long. It had photographs of him at industry events in an actual suit, that same face, but presented completely differently, polished, positioned, the specific kind of presence that fills a room. It had the list of companies, the figure that the RIA Group managed. A previous interview from 6 years ago where he had said, in the specific dry way that reads as private when you've met someone who does it genuinely, that he preferred not to be a story. He had been sleeping in her spare room for 5 weeks. He had eaten her food and fixed her tap and cleared her mother's garden. She sat with the phone for a while. She was very quiet internally. Not numb, more like the way the air goes still before something moves. Then she got up, made coffee, and went to find him. He was in the kitchen. He had heard the notification go off. He had been waiting, she suspected, for however long it took her to come downstairs. He was standing at the counter, not sitting, both hands wrapped around a mug, looking at her when she came in with the specific steadiness of a man who is not going to make this easier on himself by deflecting first. She put her phone on the table between them, with the article facing up. She did not say, "Look at this," because he knew. She said, "Did you know who I was when you said yes?" "No," he said. "I didn't know your name until you told me it. I don't know anything about you beyond what you've told me and what I've seen here." She nodded. "What did you actually get out of this?" He was quiet for a moment. Not buying time, actually thinking about how to say it accurately. "I've been doing this thing for years," he said, "going somewhere ordinary, living like no one knows who I am. It's the only way I know how to—" He stopped. "The only way I know to check that I'm still a person and not just a function." She looked at him. "You said yes to marrying a stranger on a bench," she said, "because you needed to feel like a person." "I said yes because you were honest with me," he said. "You told me exactly what you wanted, and you put collateral on the table, and you didn't pretend it was something it wasn't. I meet people all day who want things and never say so directly. You walked up and said, 'Here is what I need, here is what I can give you, here are the terms.' That's rarer than you'd think." The third question. She had 3, and this was the last one, and she asked it straight. Was any of it real? He did not hesitate. "All of it," he said. She stood there. The anger that she had been holding in the shape of those 3 questions had been very clean and very useful. It had given her somewhere to stand for the walk down the stairs and across the kitchen. The answer to the third question did not give it anywhere to go. She picked up her coffee. She turned and looked out of the garden window at the tomato plants that were still growing where he had cleared the space for them. "I need you to not talk to me today," she said. "Not because I'm angry, because I need to think." "Okay," he said. She took her coffee and went back upstairs. He stayed. That was the thing she kept coming back to, in the first hours after, when she was sitting on her bed with a book she wasn't reading. He stayed. He did not offer to go somewhere else to give her space, which would have been the polite thing. He did not explain himself further or follow her upstairs or send a message. He just stayed in the house at an appropriate distance, available if she wanted him and absent if she didn't. It was the right thing to do, and she had not expected it. She went to work both days that weekend. Not to avoid him, or not only to avoid him, because she was a person who knew what helped her think, and what helped her think was being useful, being present with someone who needed her, being in a room where the question in front of her had a concrete answer. He cooked both evenings, left it on the hob, did not make a point of it. She ate both evenings. Did not make a point of it either. On the Sunday evening she came home, and he was reading at the kitchen table, and she sat down across from him, and they sat there for a bit. "The article made me sound more interesting than I am," he said, without looking up from the book. "It made you sound like someone who owns a building," she said. "I own two," he said. "Neither of them are interesting. Are you going to tell me that the money doesn't matter, and you're just like everyone else?" "No," he said. He closed the book. "It matters. It changes things. It changes how people are with me, and it changes how I move in the world, and I'm not going to tell you otherwise because that would be patronizing." She looked at him. "What I am telling you," he said, "is that the 5 weeks in this house have been the most straightforwardly real 5 weeks I've had in a long time. And I don't want to be someone who had that and let it go because I was careful." Nadia sat with that for a moment. "I need you to know," she said, "that I'm not impressed by the money. I want you to understand that clearly. I'm not saying it to be contrary. I'm saying it because in this house, with the life I've had, the money is not the interesting thing about you. What's interesting is how you are when you think no one is watching. That's the person I've been in the kitchen with for 5 weeks, and I don't need a building to find that interesting." He looked at her with that steady look. "I know," he said, quietly, and the way he said it, not relieved, not grateful in the performed way, told her he had known it for a while and had been waiting to hear her say it. The legal challenge succeeded on day 81. Adeze called at lunchtime while Nadia was on her break. She listened to the whole sentence. Then she sat in the break room with the phone in her lap for 4 minutes. Then she called Callum. "We won," she said when he picked up. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know you didn't need luck, but I'm glad. Thank you," she said, "for everything, the paperwork, the cohabitation, all of it. You did the legal challenge," he said. "I fixed a tap. You did more than that." He was quiet again, not uncomfortable, just not trying to fill it. "I'll see you tonight," she said. "Yes," he said. On day 88, Callum put the annulment papers on the kitchen table. He had printed them. 2 copies. Neat. Organized. He put them on the table in the morning, before she came down, with a pen on top, and then he made coffee, and sat down and waited. She came into the kitchen. She looked at the papers. She looked at him. "I want to tell you something," he said, "before you decide anything." She sat down. "I'm going back next week," he said. "The person I am in that world, the one in the article, he's not a performance. He's real too. I want you to know that. There's no version of my life from here that doesn't involve the work and the meetings and the rooms I told you about." "I know," she said. "I also want you to know that the person who's been here for 7 weeks is equally real, and I would like, if you're open to it, to figure out what something honest looks like between the two of us. Not 90-day transactional, the other kind." Nadia looked at him for a long time. She looked at the papers. She picked them up. She looked at them, both copies, properly. She was a thorough person, and she read what she had been handed, even when she already knew what she was going to do. Then she walked across to the kitchen drawer, the one where her mother used to keep things she was not ready to deal with yet, the one with the old stamps and the broken torch and the birthday cards from years ago, and she put the papers in it. She closed the drawer. She turned around. "I need you to be honest with me," she said. "Not when it's convenient. Permanently. The same way you were honest when you thought I couldn't look you up. I can do that," he said, "and I need to know that if this becomes difficult, if the worlds don't fit together the way we think they might, we say so. Directly. No performing. No managing the other person." "Yes," he said. "And I'm not moving into a building," she said. That was when he smiled. Not a big smile. Small, the kind that happens when something hits exactly where it should. "I wouldn't ask you to," he said. She nodded. She made tea. She handed him a cup. They stood in the kitchen the way they had been standing in the kitchen for weeks, in the warm, ordinary quiet of two people who have done the work of finding each other and decided to stay. The house still had the peeling paint on the front gate that Nadia had been meaning to sort for 2 years. The garden still had her mother's tomato plants, tended now, properly growing. The kitchen still had the cracked tile in the corner that her mother had always meant to replace. It was still her mother's house. It would always be her mother's house. That was the point. That was what she had gone to the courthouse to save, 48 hours and one stranger ago, which turned out to be 89 days and one decision at a time. Callum's jacket was on the hook by the front door. It still did not fit him particularly well, and he still wore it on purpose, and she had stopped asking about it, and started finding it reassuring in a way she could not have explained to anyone who had not spent 7 weeks making tea in the same kitchen as him. She found the watch one evening. Her mother's watch, in the pocket of the coat she had worn to the courthouse. She had forgotten about it entirely. She took it to him where he was reading. "The collateral," she said, holding it out. "I never actually gave it to you." He looked at it, then at her. "Keep it," he said. "It was the deal. The deal changed," he said. "Keep the watch." She looked at it in her hand. Her mother's watch, the worn strap, the gold face, all the years of it. She put it on her own wrist. It was a little big. It would always be a little big. That was fine. She went and sat down across from him and picked up the book she was reading, and outside the window the last of the evening was going over the garden, and on the table between them were 2 mugs of tea, both warm, sitting where an eviction notice used to be. That was all. That was everything.